All right, so today we're going to be talking about carbon compounds, okay? So here's a picture of carbon. The reason it has 4 arms is that it can make 4 bonds. So compounds that contain carbon atoms bonded to other carbon atoms are what we call organic molecules, okay? Organic compounds are compounds that contain carbon atoms bonded to other carbon atoms. That is the definition of an organic compound. Yes, so that should be number 1 in your notes. Bless you. All right, so characteristics of carbon include the fact that it forms strong and stable bonds. Okay, carbon forms bonds with other carbon atoms, as well as a variety of other elements, such as oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. So when we're talking about these macromolecules or organic compounds, there's always the same elements that we see repeated over and over. And that is what I prefer over the video to call chop-ins. I think that's easier to remember. Which stands for carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, nitrogen, and sulfur. So if it asks you what are the 6 main elements of all living things, you would say chop-ins. So the other important thing you need to know about carbon is that it forms chains and rings. Chains and rings. All right, macromolecules. So when we're looking at macromolecules, okay, these are molecules that are really, really, really large. Okay, so they are known as macromolecules. If you look at something under the microscope, it's really, really what? Small, okay? If it's macro, it's really big. So micro and macro are opposites. This means giant molecule. These macromolecules are really made up of thousands of smaller molecules. And there are 4 types of macromolecules you will need to know for this class and for the lab activity that we're going to do tomorrow, not tomorrow, don't get excited. Next week. Tomorrow you have a vocab quiz. Okay, so the 4 groups are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Do you need to know those 4 groups of organic compounds? Yes. Do you think you need to know some things about them? Yes. So guess what we're going to keep taking notes on? Those 4 things. Okay, characteristics of carbohydrates. So these compounds are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So carbohydrates are just made of CHO. In a ratio of 1 to 2 to 1. We're not going to count all the carbons in this because it's really not that important. What I really want you to know is that carbohydrates are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. CHO. There we go. Examples of carbohydrates are sugars, starches, and celluloses. Okay? The carbohydrates are known as the quick energy foods, and that is really important, okay? These are quick energy foods because they are quickly converted to energy by the cells, right? I don't know about you guys, right around 6th period every day, or about when I get home, I start getting snacky because I'm tired from being at work all day, and I'm too lazy to cook dinner already, so then I'm just like, Cheetos. Yep. The reason your body craves simple foods like Cheetos or cookies or French fries or something like that after school is because your body knows it can turn it into usable energy super fast. And it tastes delicious. So the two main functions of carbohydrates is to be the main source of energy and for structural purposes, okay? That is the two main functions of carbohydrates, source of energy and structural support or purposes. It helps actually physically build you up. The smaller molecules, or the building blocks, the little Legos that make up these giant molecules of carbohydrates are actually just simple sugars, such as glucose. All right, so the sugars. There are three main ones we're going to talk about. So carbohydrates are classified according to the number of sugar molecules they contain. So there are monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. All right? Mono. What does mono mean? One. If you are monolingual, how many languages do you speak? One. If you are monogamous in a relationship, how many other people are you dating? One. Okay, a monosaccharide means it only contains one sugar. Saccharide means sugar, so it's only one sugar. Disaccharides, how many do you think that is? Two. Excellent. Composed of two sugar molecules. Poly means how many? If you are polygamous, how many wives do you have? A whole bunch, right? Poly is just many. Okay? So polysaccharides are composed of many molecules of sugar bonded together. It's just lots. If you're polylingual, you speak a bunch of different languages. So there are three common polysaccharides that we will talk about in the lab activity and for the rest of this unit. And they are starch, glycogen, and cellulose. All right? Starch is only found in plants. What plant is a very starchy plant? Someone shouted out. Potatoes. Yes, that is one of the best examples. Corn is technically very starchy also. Okay? This is the way plants store excess glucose. So if the plant has been doing photosynthesis, it's making all of this sugar, and it has no need for it yet, it will store it in the form of starch. That's why potatoes are so delicious. Glycogen is only found in animals, okay? And this is the way that animals store excess glucose. So, for example, you go to the student store, you buy a Snickers bar and a slushie for lunch, which is a horrible lunch, although it sounds delicious, okay? and you eat all of that sugar, okay? And let's say you have to walk from A buildings to T buildings like 7 times, so you burn off a lot of that sugar. But there's still some left over when you go home and you go to sleep, okay? At first, your body's going to take all that extra sugar and turn it into glycogen. And your liver actually does that by bonding together a bunch of the glucose from all your candy and slushy, okay, and turning it into glycogen. That is not how the body permanently stores extra sugar. Eventually, glycogen turns into what? Fat. Okay? Cellulose. Cellulose is the stringy fibrous material found in the cell wall of plants. How many of you, raise your hand, have eaten celery and you get those gross like string things that you cannot eat? Excellent. That is cellulose. All right? It gives strength to the plant cell wall, and it is a major component of wood and paper. So you are writing on a very thin slice of cellulose on a chunk of cellulose that has been shaped into a desk. So next time you're trying to sound smart and you want to ask your neighbor for something, you'd be like, may I please have a piece of cellulose to write notes on? And they will probably make fun of you. Now you can see how popular I was. Lipids. Examples of lipids are fats, oils, and waxes. The first thing I think of when I see lipid is movie theater butter for your popcorn, right? Whatever that golden liquid is, it is delicious. So these compounds are generally not soluble in water. Yes. They contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but not in the same ratio as carbohydrates, okay? They have a different structure. And I included a picture for you in your notes a little bit further down that we will label in a minute. And there are 2 building blocks of lipids, fatty acids and glycerol. So a lipid has 1 molecule of glycerol and 3 fatty acid tails. So on your drawing on your notes, it looks a little bit different. But this main straight part, the stick, is the glycerol molecule, okay? So circle that part on your 2 fatty acid drawings, or lipid drawings, and that one straight part is the glycerol molecule. So make sure you label that, circle it, and write glycerol next to it, because you will need to know that. Each of the tails or ribbons that's hanging off of that glycerol is a fatty acid. Okay, so both of those are fatty acids, both of those are fatty acids, both of those are fatty acids. So a lipid has 1 molecule of glycerol and 3 fatty acid tails. That's always going to look like that, okay? If a fatty acid tail has at least 1 carbon-carbon double bond, where it doesn't have hydrogen on both sides of it, it is said to be an unsaturated fat. So for example, right here, you see how there's only 2 hydrogens instead of having 4 hydrogens right there because of the double bond? This is an unsaturated fatty acid. In your notes, there's a picture that looks like this. And then there's a second line like that. Do you guys see it? Okay. This part would be the unsaturated part. Now, if it has no double bonds and every carbon has 2 hydrogens on it, then it is said to be saturated. So these are saturated fatty acids. right, so what kind of acid is this? Saturated or unsaturated? What do you guys think? Unsaturated. Why is it unsaturated? Good. The double bonds right there, right? The carbons don't have two on every single one, two hydrogens on every single one. So that is definitely an unsaturated fat. Okay? Now butter. Is butter unsaturated? No. It is a saturated fat, and therefore it is solid at room temperature. If your parents buy special butter and it's liquid at room temperature, that means it's like, I can't believe it's not butter, or like healthy blend butter where half of it's olive oil. Okay? Otherwise, at like this temperature, butter is a solid. Examples include shortening, lard, or butter. Unsaturated fats tend to be liquids or oils at room temperature, like olive oil and vegetable oil. And I don't know, coconut oil is like right in the middle, so I really don't know what that classifies as. It does. So you don't need to write down the complete sentence for each of these, all right? You just need to know that lipids are used to store energy, part of the cell membrane, form waterproof coverings, yep, and cushion and insulate organs. Nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are macromolecules containing the elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. All right, so that is chopping. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. There are two kinds of nucleic acids, RNA and DNA, which we will learn about in a lot of detail come second semester. And the building blocks, or the smaller pieces that make up this macromolecule, are called nucleotides. And the whole purpose of nucleic acids is to store and transmit genetic information. Proteins. Sweet, this is the last section of the notes. Here we go. Proteins are macromolecules that contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So we call those CHON, right? CHON. The building blocks of proteins are called amino acids. And there are 20 different amino acids that make up all the proteins in every living thing on the entire earth. Oops. Okay, so I gave you an amino acid on your paper, and it does not exactly look like these. Okay, so I'm going to draw one that looks like yours by blocking this out. Okay. Isn't that beautiful? So beautiful. I'm such an artist. All right. Your molecule on your paper looks like this. All right. Okay. That's what your molecule looks like. So the first part of this molecule that you need to circle and label is the carboxyl group. This part on the far right-hand side is the carboxyl group. Okay, so on your picture in your lecture notes, the far right-hand side, those three circles, circle them and label it the carboxyl group. Are we good? The next part, let me change color. Let's see, the next part over here is called the amine group. This part right here, this part right here is the hydrogen. And last but not least, right here, the R group is the thing that changes from amino acid to amino acid, okay? So this is like the variable group. Okay? These are important. As you can see, there's a few uses listed for you that include enzymes, hormones, transportation in the cell, movement. Proteins are essentially what everything is built out of. Okay? So tomorrow, what do we have tomorrow? Vocab quiz. Only over sections 2.1 and 2.2. All right?